The Holy Gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ according to Luke. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through it. A man was there named Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was rich. He was trying to see who Jesus was, but on account of the crowd, he could not because he was short in stature. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore tree to see him, because he was going to pass that way. When Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to him, "Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today." So he hurried down and was happy to welcome him. All who saw it began to grumble and said, "He has gone to be the guest of one who is a sinner." Zacchaeus stood there and said to the Lord, "Look, half my possessions, Lord, I will give to the poor, and if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I will pay back 4 times as much." Then Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because he too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek out and to save the lost." The Gospel of the Lord. Please be seated. Have you ever climbed a tree? As a kid, gone off into the woods somewhere, seen that big old oak tree just sitting there with its branches just right, begging to be climbed. I used to. We had this big old oak tree behind the house. We had this place called the Foresters Club right behind my home. That's where the mafia used to meet every couple of years. Really, the mob. Then down from there was the sand pit. And the sand pit was where one time I built a tunnel. My mother was not happy I was tunneling under the sand pit. I was dragged out with that, I scuffed my head by that day. But there was an oak tree there. Big, big old oak tree. And in the summertime, I used to love it. I used to go down by myself, and I would climb up this oak tree. I'd get all the way up, as far as I could go before the branches got a little bit too thin to hold my weight. And I would just sit up there for hours, looking out all around me. I could see the roofs of the homes. I could actually see the top of the Foresters Club over there. Off in the distance, I could just catch a glimpse of the field, the playground, and kids playing over there. And then down below, especially in the middle of summer with the sun high in the sky, shimmering off the water, down by the swamps just below. There I was, up there on top of this tree, me and a few squirrels. What it does for you when you get up high, when you take a look around you from that perspective, it changes everything, doesn't it? You see things that you never saw before. You get a different view, a different way of looking at your world that you live in and day out down below. You get away from all of the noise. For me, it was just getting away from all of the noise and all of the bullies in my life. Climbing up the top of that tree and being alone. In their book, Leadership, Raul Heifetz and Linsky write about what they call the balcony metaphor. Balcony metaphor is saying that we need sometimes to get off of the dance floor and up into the balcony. We need to do this every so often to get a different perspective on what's going on in our lives, in our world, in our community, in the things that we do and the ministries that we are being called into. When we're down in the pit, we lose where we are at. You've been to a dance. I'm sure you've been to dances. Nowadays, they're all over the place. And you can't see anything. You can't see people. All you got is your partner in front of you, maybe a couple people around you. You really can't see anybody else. You know there's a band or a DJ somewhere. But when you get up into the balcony, now you can pick out who's who and who's where and what they're doing and how they're moving and what they're moving towards. Today's story of Zacchaeus is one about a man who is short in stature, but climbs up a sycamore tree, and then when he climbs that tree, what happens? His perspective is changed. He sees Jesus, and suddenly he sees probably the people he has defrauded, the people he has collected taxes from, the village in which he lives. He sees it all in a different way. And he realizes in that moment that what he has been doing has not been good, not just for the village he lives in, but for himself. And so he comes to Jesus. Especially after Jesus says, I'm coming to your house. It's a heck of a way, a reverse invitation. And then he is transformed. His eyes are opened. His heart is opened. He promises now to give back the money he has defrauded, to give away half of his possessions to help the poor and the needy. For Zacchaeus, it's more than just a pure, eye-opening experience. It's a life-changing experience. And maybe now more than ever, in the mush that we are seeing out there in the world today, in this political season, in this season of finger-pointing and all this other stuff, maybe it's time for us to get up in the balcony or up into a tree and take a different look. Get a new perspective. I got a question for you. Hands up for anybody who has heard about Standing Rock Indian Reservation in North Dakota. There we go. We got a few. I had none at 8 o'clock. How many know about those gentlemen who took over the Federal Reserve in Oregon? Hands up. That's better. Do we know what happened to those men in Oregon? Armed white men. They got acquitted. Do we know what's happening to the Native Americans at Standing Rock? They're being run down by the military, or National Guard, I should say, and the state police in North Dakota. Do we know what they're fighting for in North Dakota? What were the guys fighting for in Oregon? The right to bear arms, probably? To show the federal government they were wrong? Be a militia? No? What, Adam? Land.
They're encroaching on their land.
But they,
The government would say that they were taking their land, they take the Sioux.
yeah, but they got off. What's happening to the Sioux? They're getting elected. But it's a little bit tougher, isn't it, for the Sioux? Because you're Indians. Let's face it. What have we been doing for the last couple hundred years to their treaties? What have we been doing to their lands? What have we been doing to them as a people? Wounded Knee. What do we continue to do? All for what? An oil pipeline. Imagine for a moment that National Grid or whatever decided to put a natural gas pipeline through Melrose. And that natural gas pipeline would have to go through Wyoming Cemetery. How would you feel? This gas pipeline, an oil pipeline, is going through sacred land. Sacred property. Land upon which these Native Americans have lived upon, buried their dead. Land which they, in fact, worship and hold sacred. As one woman said in an interview that I was watching, she said, "This is not a fighting war as such. It is a spiritual war." And that kind of hit me. It is indeed a spiritual war that we are engaged in this time and in this place. As people turn away from religious institutions, spirituality has been taken a hit. Sure, we may know the creeds and we know some prayers, but how is our spiritual life? It's the way in which we treat one another, the way in which we treat our land, the way in which we treat the air in which we breathe and the water which we drink. It's our turning our backs on places like Flint, Michigan, and not caring about polluting the water that those Native Americans will have to drink at some point. All to save a buck or two at the gas pump. We have lost our spiritual anchors. We have lost our moral and ethical compasses. We have lost ourselves in the process. It is time for us as a community of faith, as Christians in this era, to stand up into the balcony and take a look at the world in which we see today. The injustices that are happening all around. To take a stand. A moral stand. I always find it interesting, watching all this stuff on television, how many leaks from this one coming from this leak to that leak. We got more leaks. Plumbers should be working overtime with all the leaks we got on the news lately. And I think it's interesting. Here's WikiLeaks. Okay, I don't care what you say about WikiLeaks. It could be right, it could be wrong, it could be positive, whatever. But WikiLeaks is some guy sitting in an embassy in London because if he goes away from that embassy in London, he's going to get arrested by his own country or get deported to his own country because he's a criminal. He's wanted for sexual assault in his own country. But yet, we sit back taking WikiLeaks like pablum and sucking off it like it's real food. Get up in the balcony and take a look. Get up into the tree and look around. It is not as simple or as cut and dried as we may think it is. Nothing in history has ever been simple and cut and dried. Even Jesus knew that as he walked through Jericho. Nothing is simple. The wave of a hand, the raising of the dead, giving sight to the blind, healing the lepers, opening the ears of the deaf, did not change the hearts and minds of those who saw it. And Jesus was still crucified. It is not an easy time for us to live, but it is the time in which we are living. It is not the time to become afraid or to hide. For if we become afraid and we hide and we pull inward, then the terrorists at 9/11 have won. Because their goal was not just to knock down a few buildings or drop a few planes here and there. Their goal was to make us scared, and they have worked. They've won. It's our fear that is driving our politics today. It's our fear which is driving our society today. It is our fear which sets an armed military group up against Native Americans in North Dakota. Get up in the tree. Get out of the mess. See what God is calling us into. We are in a new place and a new time. We can't go backwards, we can't go back to the 50s. See? You get blocked going to the 50s. It ain't going to work. I can go back. I can go back and bring all the great stuff in the 1950s and bring it here to the... But see, when you go forward, you can get out. So, see, 1940s, 50s. Not going to work. Right on out into the future. Here I am in the 21st century. Here I am moving forward in life. Here I am with God's love embracing us all. Stop being afraid. Stop being scared. Stand up into the balcony. Climb a tree. Climb a tree, guys, right? Have you climbed a tree? Good. Tree climbers. Alex, you climb a tree? Yay! My hip is fine. My hip is great. I can stand up on my hip. I am not afraid of my hip. I am not afraid of 2 bad knees and 2 crappy shoulders. And I'm also not afraid of a couple of politicians. Because I know, as Zacchaeus knew, as Jesus knows, that God is indeed in charge of what we are about. That God is with us. God is right here, right now, moving through our lives, moving through this community. We may not see it. We are so blinded at times. But open your eyes, open your hearts, as Zacchaeus did. And new life will be born. Jesus went into a hole. They stuck a big rock in front of that hole. They said, finally, we got rid of this troublemaker. Bonk. But we know what happened, don't we? That big stone meant nothing. Even today, I was just reading an archaeological dig they're doing on the sepulcher over there. They got down deep. Guess what? They didn't find Jesus yet. They didn't find Jesus. Why? He is not there. He is arisen. And he is alive in our hearts and in this community. Struggle as we may over the next few years, I believe that we will continue to live and to shine and to share our ministries. And that the love that we show from this community will grow and will prosper in all who enter in. Zacchaeus was transformed as God seeks to transform our lives, to open our hearts, to open our eyes. Be not afraid, but go boldly into that future. Live in the present. Don't allow fear and anxiety to crush the spirit. Instead, live into the new life and light of Jesus Christ. Amen.